let's wind back the clock to 1989. After the great success of the Famicom, also known as the NES, Nintendo had decided to launch a portable console, the Game Boy, that was released in April of that same year. With the release of the Game Boy, a young man by the name of Satoshi Tajiri was suddenly struck with an idea. At the time, Tajiri spent his days producing and self-releasing a magazine by the name of Game Freak, with the help of his good friend Ken Sugimori. With the magazine, Tajiri and Sugimori were able to express their love and admiration for video games, reporting on various circuit and home console releases. But it was with the release of the Nintendo Game Boy and the huge potential Tajiri saw in it, they decided to turn Game Freak into a video game development company, a mere 5 days after the launch of the console. As a kid, Tajiri loved playing in nature and used to run around the countryside collecting various bugs and insects to show to his friends and family. This passion laid the groundwork for an idea that was later sparked by the release of the Game Boy, or more specifically, by its linking functionality. In a dream, Tajiri imagined little creatures like the ones he used to catch as a child, crawling along the cable, being transferred from one Game Boy to another. He thought that with this idea, he could create a game that would recapture his childhood passion and share it with the younger generation that was growing in a more industrialized world than he had. He immediately pitched the idea to Nintendo, his idea for a game that would let kids capture little creatures with their Game Boys, and Nintendo decided to support his endeavor. This conversation between Game Freak and Nintendo started the birth of what we know as Pokémon. Pokémon ended up taking much more time and resources to develop than originally expected. Red, Green, and Blue had the most expensive development of any Game Boy game, and adjusting for inflation, they are still the most expensive games ever developed on a handheld, and the 16th most expensive games ever made. Development took 6 years, and by the time they were released in 1996, the Game Boy was in a decline and nearly obsolete. But against all odds, Pokémon turned out to be an absolute success, with sales of both the game and the shows
captured the imagination of children around the world, and billions and billions of dollars from their parents' wallets.
The novelty of Pokémon's concept caught the world by storm. The social nature of the game, paired with a smart marketing campaign and some clever design details, like having 2 different versions of the game with version-exclusive Pokémon, made them spread like wildfire. Every kid that bought the game would also turn to a salesman for Game Freak, trying to convince their friends to buy the game, in a collective effort to catch them all, something impossible by itself. This concept alone organically made a community grow around Pokémon, with the entire world working together to uncover its mysteries, become an obsessed and completely fascinated
is now in full
with the
mania.
adventure.
Here's ABC's Tom Ford.
Fan favorite Pokemon Pikachu became the franchise mascot, and as this cute electric mouse became a worldwide icon, Nintendo and Game Freak began to capitalize heavily on the game's success. The Pokemon Company was created in 1998 to manage the franchise, being equally shared by Nintendo and Game Freak and Creatures Inc. With a clear guideline, the three began rapidly expanding the franchise. Pokemon received an anime adaptation that would also be accompanied by movies and trading card game, and an insane amount of merchandise. A revision of the original games, retouched to be more similar to this anime, was launched into 1998 with Pokémon Yellow, with an interactive Pikachu as
Pokémon
its
Yellow,
primary
the special
feature.
Pikachu edition for Game Boy Color, where it's you and Pikachu catching as many as you can.
A year later, in 1999, Pokémon Gold and Silver were launched as a second generation of Pokémon. They included the new region of Johto, as well as the original region of Kanto. 100 new Pokémon, and drastically improved on the original games. The second generation vastly improved the balance of the battle system from the originals, and being Game Boy Color exclusives, they were able to feature much better graphics and an internal clock that allowed for a weekly and night cycle inside of the game's world. The new Pokemon region were integrated into an anime, card game, and merchandise, and started a cycle that would prove as extremely lucrative for the Pokemon companies.
Pokemon 3. Discover the secrets of the spell of the unknown.
From that point on, every couple of years a new generation of Pokemon was released, serving as the main pillar to then expand the rest of the franchise branches. Pokemon quickly became Nintendo's staple handheld franchise, with every new generation becoming an instant hit and pushing sales of every new Nintendo game to an astonishing
And
numbers.
Pokémon Pearl. Gotta catch 'em all. Only for Nintendo DS. Rated E for everyone.
People simply couldn't get enough Pokemon, and the franchise couldn't be stopped from growing exponentially. Eventually, this astronomical growth led to Pokemon becoming the highest grossing multimedia franchise in the entire world, vastly surpassing like Mickey Mouse or Star Wars, that Pokemon still holds to this day. Pokemon video games were the foundation of this success. It was the dream of the game developers to make it more of their childhood, but which made them the best-selling franchise, only topped by Mario. But of course, every success story hides a dark side, and Pokemon was no exception.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Pokemon games quickly developed a clear formula that was extremely effective. In the world of Pokemon, the day of your 10th birthday, you become ready to leave home and go on your own adventure. You start by choosing your first Pokemon between the three basic rock, paper, scissors types: fire, water, and grass. From that point on, your objective is clear: become a Pokemon champion. In order to accomplish that goal, you must defeat a gym leaders, obtaining their 8 respected badges, and then go on to challenge the Elite Four. The Pokemon professor that hands you your starter also gives you a Pokédex, a sort of Pokemon encyclopedia that you must help complete by catching as many Pokemon as you can. You usually have a rival that starts his or her adventure along with yours and progresses at the same rate as you do, acting as a progress checker. Along the way, you'll find some bad guys who want to dismantle your plans, and different characters like Team Rocket will occur, and some sort of chosen one that must help or defeat legendary Pokemon to stop the end of the world is usually used, which may not be related to the bad guys' plans. Gameplay wise, you can fight and catch Pokemon in the wild by debilitating them and throwing them in a Pokeball. Pokemon only learn 4 moves at a time, needing to forget old moves in order to learn new ones. You can also only carry a maximum of 6 Pokemon at a time, and the rest can be stored at a PC in the Pokemon Center. You can then use these Pokemon to battle other trainers, which lets them gain experience and level up, sometimes evolving into a stronger form. All of these elements have stayed the same generation after generation for 24 years. No other franchise has lived so long and changed so little, but this is just a side effect of the immense success of Pokemon, and it got from the get-go. The structure of Pokemon was so effective that it became extremely scary to alter it in any significant way, but as they kept releasing games using the same formula, the Pokemon Company realized they didn't really need to change much. They had struck gold so hard with the first original structure that as long as they were dressed up differently, the new games would still sell like hotcakes. This meant that between generations, the improvements could be basically reduced to better graphics and a few new mechanics that weren't too intrusive, along with the new set of Pokémon and the new region. In the first few generations, some of the new mechanics that were introduced actually stuck around for future releases, like breeding, double battles, or weather conditions. But most of these new mechanics were actually dropped from the next generations, in an effort to keep the game simple. This practice left mechanics like tree planting or base building, or flying through the overworld, or mega evolving, or having your Pokemon follow you as one-off, half-baked ideas that were never built upon. The idea was to artificially slow down the progress between games, with the intention of releasing them yearly without having account for too many new mechanics. This practice was incentivized by the fact that Pokémon is a multimedia franchise that is built up starting from a mainline video game release. It was in the best interest of the Pokémon company to streamline the development of the said video games as much as possible, since all the branches of Pokémon games were as new Pokémon characters.
No way!
Pokémon, the movie, White, Victini, and Zekrom.
It wasn't relevant to the anime, trading card, or merchandise whether or not the games were improving their battle systems or the quality of their puzzles, as long as new Pokémon were appearing in them. This dependency, along with the fact that the games were selling very well anyways, allowed the Pokémon company to reduce risk-taking and development cost of the video games to a minimum and annualizing their release. The streamlining of the development of the process meant that hard dates could be set for the game's releases, allowing the Pokémon company to plan tournaments, movies, or spin-offs ahead of time, making the time of their release of the new generation into a multimedia event. The gears of Pokémon franchise were turning faster than ever, and the economical success of their approach was unquestionable. However, the game slowly started to suffer from the weight of the never-ending money-making machine that was resting on their shoulders. All the streamlining and time constraints steadily drained the soul out of the franchise, with every new generation being less inspired and ambitious than the previous one. Pokémon became stuck in an eternal Groundhog Day. The developers were created the same game over and over, and the players, just like Ash and Pikachu, were forever stuck at 10 years old, always trying to become a Pokémon champions, but never evolving or taking the next step forward. But Groundhog Day can't last forever. One day you'll end up waking up and coming back to the real world.
Oh, my darling, are you having another nightmare?
Players have always wanted more from Pokémon. The mainline game sold well among new generations of kids, for whom Pokémon as good as new, and for older people that, like Tajiri making the original games, wanted to relive a part of their childhood through Pokémon. But outside of nostalgia, it was clear for most people that Pokémon was punching under its weight, especially considering the amount of money it generated. As soon as we got a taste of what Pokémon could look like in a home console with spin-offs like Pokémon Stadium and Snap, our minds were running wild with possibilities. The franchise had potential, like a few others, to blow us out of the water with a fully fledged home console RPG, but the Pokémon Company had other plans. They preferred to spend their money on other aspects of the franchise. Plus, Nintendo wanted to keep Pokémon as their main handheld console seller. This meant that all we would get from Nintendo 64 and GameCubes would be Pokémon spin-offs, while mainline releases were bound to be limited by Nintendo's handheld hardware.
Pokémon Sun and Pokémon Moon.
The release of Pokémon and Colosseum and XD, too often overlooked. In the GameCube, these spin-offs would include traditional Pokemon gameplay, due to the fear of that being overshadowed by the main releases. Following these decisions, we were left only to dream about the possibilities of a home console Pokemon RPG, or an MMO if you wanted to dream big. Some people even tried to make their own Pokemon games, with real-time battles and other amazing ideas, spawning an insane amount of Pokemon bootlegs, which were quickly shut down by Nintendo's copyright policies. For years, it seemed to be like Pokemon dreams would never be fulfilled. But then, something very unexpected happened. Following the failure of the Wii U, Nintendo decided to turn things around with the announcement of Nintendo Switch, an handheld home console hybrid, which effectively utilized both the divisions of the company. The Switch was seen inside the Nintendo as the perfect platform to revise its main franchise. Not the whole company was focused on this one console. First game release was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which took the franchise back to its free roaming adventure roots, with an immense, ambitious open world that set a new mark for what was possible for this kind of game. Then came the turn for Super Mario Odyssey, another gigantic effort to bring back the spirit from Mario 64 and breathe new life and much needed innovation into the 3D platforming genre. As both of these games were getting great reviews and being critically acclaimed by the entire gaming industry, eyes started to turn to the next biggest Nintendo franchise, Pokémon. People started to think that, at last, now that Pokémon would be forced to release a home console, we would be finally getting a game that we had all dreamed of and been kept away from us. But at last, we wouldn't get a game where Pokémon could truly shine. With the development of the combat system animations, all these creatures that we've known for so many years could finally feel truly alive. But the reality was very different. The Pokemon Company had ridden themselves into a corner that was nearly impossible to get out of. The gears of the Pokemon franchise were spinning too fast to manage, and Game Freak was poorly prepared to make the jump to the Switch. Finding themselves between a rock and a hard place, Game Freak did what they could. While most AAA console titles take many years and teams of hundreds, and not thousands, of people to develop games, Game Freak had a very different situation, with a team around 150 people development of the 3DS games. They had to get used to switch the Switch's hardware and develop a Pokemon game in a new environment that had ambitious over the years. Needless to say, the resulting product was absolutely...
My name is Teresa, and we're here to kick off to the first view of the live gameplay of Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield.
Following the reveal of the E3 2019, it became clear that the games were in an extremely unpolished state. Game Freak had to immediately come out and do damage control, justifying the absence of many Pokemon in their national decks. To the extra effort not have been put into remaking the battle animations for the new games. This excuse was quickly proved to be a blatant lie, with obvious evidence that the new games were reusing same animations from the previous generations. Although the games were not clearly ready, the Pokemon machine will keep marching forward. So, Sword and Shield were released in November 2019. Things turned out to be even worse than expected. The new gimmick of Dynamaxing wasn't able to cover up for the fact that battles were still the same as 24 years ago, and the animations were lazy and unfinished. Game Freak had clearly caught every corner possible in making the game done. The level design was so uninspired that it was well as being procedurally generated, and the game was dumbed down and streamlined to the point of annoyance. Cutscenes were half-baked and new wild areas suffered from severe lag and popping, making the game feel extremely cheap and inferior. Finally, the complacency of the Pokemon Company had caught up to them. As the rug was being pulled under their feet, the Pokemon game we all dreamed about was nowhere to be found. Instead, we got a product of what Pokemon had already become, but we're naively refusing to accept a soulless, uninspired franchise that is more concerned with making maximum profit than with making the best games they possibly can.
Hey, Flaps. What we gonna do?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
The thing is that, in spite of the backlash of Pokemon Sword and Shield have sold just as good, if not better, than the previous generations, quickly becoming one of the Switch's best-selling titles. The game's state and the controversy surrounding them didn't affect sales in any significant way, which means that the Pokemon Company may have not learned anything from this experience. The Pokemon Company formula is still as strong as ever, and it seems like the old trends of the franchise might be able to keep going on the Switch and maintain their past success. Many people who hadn't played the Pokemon games for years decided to jump back in with Sword and Shield. And while many have been disappointed by the lack of evolution, others are reliving the content and saying it's amazing, like IGN. This means that it's entirely up to the Pokemon Company what to do next with the franchise. If they decide to keep going down this route of remaking the same game over and over, they'll probably be able to melt their formula for a few more years.
The transition to the Nintendo Switch hardware with its, it being much more powerful, allowing us to be much more expressive with each of the individual Pokemon.
However, if Pokemon truly wants to live up to its potential, it needs to take some risks and add some substantial changes to the games going forward. Pokemon needs to take some cues from other Nintendo franchises, like Mario or Zelda, that despite being made for all ages, actually challenges the player instead of treating him or her like a dumb child. If real-time battles are too big to task, turn-based combat has evolved in many ways. Instead of just sticking to the same basic boring system that was already outdated by the first generation. A real Zelda-like open world could be implemented into the games rather than being restrained to one small area, with real correctly sized Pokemon running around in their respective environments. Actually challenging puzzles that use the abilities of Pokemon could be used to introduce the games, instead of the brain-numbing gym challenges that were used. These and many more ideas could be implemented into the games to get to closer fulfilling the potential of the franchise that was always shown to others. However, implementing changes and improving the games needs time and resources, which is a risk that Pokemon Company might not be willing to take. Let's take Assassin's Creed for example. Despite it being much better compared to other franchises, with many distinct huge development teams inside of Ubisoft working on the games, time eventually caught up to them. After a couple of rough launches, they had to make a hard decision to stop the annual releases and turn into a bi-yearly franchise. Game Freak would have to make a similar decision, vastly expanding their studios in order to make various big budget games at once, and then probably having to stop releasing games for a few years. However, many more things depend on Pokemon games than Assassin's Creed, so Game Freak may not be in the position to make that sacrifice. Only time will tell if the Pokemon Company makes the correct decision. For now, we can only wait and hope that things will somehow change for the better. Hopefully the new DLCs for Pokemon Sword and Shield that will release later in this year will push us in the right direction. Personally, I've been let down by Pokemon's weird mistakes and it making the hard decisions they need to make. However, there will always be an inside of me, a part of the child that used to dream of what Pokemon could one day become while he played on his DS. and that child is not willing to give up his hopes of Pokemon one day finally fulfilling his dreams.
Catch 'em all.